Hello students, in this class we will be learning two things that we need to know to get better in comprehension, specifically answering comprehension questions. Now, we've known that comprehension is you reading a passage, having a proper understanding, and giving correct answers to the comprehension passage. Now, comprehension passage also goes beyond that. There are times when the question are not direct. There are also times when your answers or the answers to the comprehension passage will actually come from your own understanding of the comprehension passage. We all know that, okay, when it's time for you to answer the question, what do? You check the question and then you go straight to the passage to get your answers, because that question is a direct question where you find your answers in the comprehension passage. But there are times when the answers have to come from your own understanding of the comprehension passage. What I'm trying to say is that when you are giving answers to the question, you are not just picking out the words that you see in the comprehension passage and use these words as the answer, meaning picking the exact word used in the passage. What we are about to learn is how to interpret a comprehension passage and give it your own answer through your understanding. That is why I said earlier that comprehension a passage, you must have a proper understanding of a comprehension passage before you start answering the question. Now, the first part we are going to learn is the interpretation level. The interpretation level. This is the level of reading where a learner goes beyond the surface meaning of the words used in the comprehension passage. So this is when you as a student read the comprehension passage. After reading the comprehension passage, you can explain it because you understand it. And you can use your understanding to answer any question. There are times when they pick a sentence in the comprehension passage and they expect you to answer it. Now, you might not know the actions before of the subject used in the comprehension passage, so you have to think deeply. That is what interpretation level is. Interpretation level is when you think deeply. Now we are going to run through this passage sentence for us to understand what we will be learning today. Now look at this passage sentence. Please, I want you to follow me and stay focused and pay attention so that you can be able to understand this. Now, the passage sentence says, the child's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her empty plates. Now, just imagine you have a comprehension passage, a very full comprehension passage, and then in the middle of the comprehension passage, this was inserted. The child's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her empty plate. And then you check the question of the comprehension passage. Probably this part of the passage was underlined. And then you check the question of the comprehension passage. And they tell you the underlined words in the passage. What was the action of the child? The underlined words in the passage. What was the action of the child? Now, your normal answer would be, the child's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her empty plate. Oh, she cried. That would be your normal answer. She cried. The question says in the underlying passage, what was the action of the child? So you just go straight to the point. Direct answer, she cried. But for interpretation level, where you have to go beyond the words and explain it in your own way, you would say she was hungry or sad because she had no food. So what this answer is an interpretation to the passage sentence. So I'll read the passage sentence again. I want you to think deeply. The child's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her empty plate. Now interpret this. What it means is, oh, she looked at her empty plate, meaning there is no food. Because food is placed on plates, meaning she had no food. If she has no food, she is hungry. And she is hungry and there is no food anywhere, she is sad. And when she gets sad, what happens? She cries. So you going on to explain all this before you go straight to the answer is interpretation. It is you interpreting what you've read from your own understanding. Now let's move on to passage sentence 2. Joy walked into the classroom with her head down and tears in her eyes. Joy walked into the classroom with her head down and tears in her eyes. The question says, why was Joy unhappy? Why was Joy unhappy? And then you ask yourself, okay, why is she unhappy? There must be a reason why she is unhappy. Now, the only way you can interpret that and give an answer to it is for you to think deeply. You have to think deeply. You have to think beyond the words. You have to look beyond the words that are used in the passage to get the answer. Now, the sentence says again, Joy walked into the classroom with her head down and tears in her eyes. The next thought you have is, probably she might have been scolded, because the sentence said she walked into the classroom, meaning she was somewhere before she walked into the classroom. Probably she might have been scolded, because before Joy left the classroom, Joy was happy. But the moment Joy walked back into the classroom, Joy's head was down and tears in her eyes. Something must have happened. Now, you thinking like that is you interpreting the passage. So your answer could be, she might have been scolded or felt embarrassed. Probably something happened and she felt so embarrassed and it got to her. So she walked into the classroom with tears in her eyes. And one thing is that when a person feel embarrassed, most times they tend to cry. So what you've done is you've interpreted the passage. Now let's move on to the next level that you need to know when it comes to answering a comprehension passage. Now, the next level we will be learning that will help us get better in comprehension is the projection level. So we've gone through the interpretation level where you explain a comprehension passage with your own understanding, using your own understanding. Projection level is totally different from interpretation level. In fact, we do this a lot, but we do not know that it's actually this is the projection level of reading. Now, what is projection level? This level of reading requires the reader to put his imagination to work. You are the reader. This is when the reader predicts what might happen next in the passage. It's similar to you watching a movie. And then before it gets to probably the next part or the next episode of the movie, you already know or you've predicted that, okay, I'm sure this is what will happen next. Now, that is all about the projection level, especially when you are reading a comprehension passage. Before you read the next sentence or the next paragraph, you already have it in mind that, okay, I feel this is what will happen next to the subject or the character in the passage. Now we're going to run through passage sentences to understand what projection level means. So like I said earlier, this will help you get better in comprehension passage. There are times when you do not give an answer to a comprehension, you do not give a direct answer to a comprehension passage, the questions that follow the comprehension passage. There are times when you have to think deeply for you to get the answers to the comprehension passage. That is what we are learning in this class. Now let's run through the passage sentence and give answers to it. So like I said earlier, projection level requires the reader to put his imagination to work. So this is when you predict what will happen next. So as I'm about to read the passage sentence, I want you to imagine things. So like as you listen to the passage sentence, do well to put your imagination to work and predict what will happen next. Now, the passage sentence says, Tunde forgot to set his alarm and woke up late on the day of his final exam. Tunde forgot to set his alarm and woke up late on the day of his final exam. The question says, what do you think will happen next? What do you think will happen to Tunde? So when you think deeply, Tunde woke up late Tunde forgot to set his alarm and woke up late on the day of his final exam. Meaning Tunde had exam, and it's not just an ordinary exam, it was his final exams that will take him to the next level. Now Tunde forgot to set his alarm. It simply means probably Tunde might miss the exam. So if you think like that now, you've predicted what will happen next to Tunde. There's every probability that Tunde might miss the exam. Alright, so the answer says he might rush to school and possibly miss part of his exam. So if you give answers like that or you think like that, what have you done? You've put your imagination to work and you've predict what will happen next. So do well whenever you're reading a comprehension passage. As you read through, probably you can just stop and think and predict, okay, I've read the first two paragraphs. I want to predict what will happen next in this story. What is going to happen next in this comprehension passage. And if you predict correctly, it simply means you put your imagination to work. Now, passage sentence 2. The sky was cloudy and thunder rumbled in the distance. The sky was cloudy and thunder rumbled in the distance. Now, if you put your imagination to work, what will be your answer to this? Very good. It will likely rain soon. It shows that it will likely rain soon. And not just that, the people should take shelter because it will likely rain soon. So please do well whenever you're reading a comprehension passage to learn to interpret the comprehension passage by explaining it. And then lastly, also putting your imagination to work. If you can get better in these two steps, I assure you that you will be very good in reading a comprehension passage, understanding it, and giving correct answers to it. Thank you.